What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Red Top Report. I'm your host, Joe Gallagher, and it's November, so we're going to be talking about something rather common among the younger male conglomerate of today, and we'll catch you right after this. Welcome back to Red Top Report, everybody. We're talking about, as they say, and forgive the term, but No Nut November, and I wanted to bring Max back on because honestly, Max, I think we've got a pretty good chemistry, no lie.
Yeah, no, it's been great to be on the last couple times. We talked about Elon Musk. Slightly different topic today, but
yes,
happy to be on.
No, it's something to be taught. It's something to be spoken about, and I know that you grew up living whatever you grew up doing. I grew up living, as I've shared very publicly, with my own problems and concerns, especially living a very immoral life. And this is something that everybody talks about, No Nut November. And I want to kind of dive into that and see, like, maybe it should just kind of like always be no nut, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Within the context of marriage, it's okay. But what we're talking about here, so a lot of these internet trends, you have like Sober October, No Nut November. Joe Rogan's famous for doing the Sober October, but
No Shave November.
No Shave November, yeah.
I've been doing No Shave November for like 14 years.
So this is actually, I used to have like a Duck Dynasty beard. It would like went down to here, but you remember.
I remember.
That was 3 years of No Shave November. But the, it's really, I think it's like a secular led thing, this No Nut November, right?
Yeah.
It's like,
it's just a secular thing when the boys are together and it's just like, alrighty guys. So, really just don't masturbate for a whole month. Sorry. Yeah. Okay. Well, first it's so difficult because it's one of those scenarios where like a secular of the world thing that actually is producing some type of good, but what's the purpose? Why? I mean, and then what happens when December 1st comes around? Is just Pornhub servers just crash all over the world? What's the deal?
Yeah, well, I feel like there was, I remember in my ancient Greek philosophy class in college, they talked about like there's two different types of hedonism. There was the hedonism where it was like just go all out, go balls to the wall, for lack of better terms. Go get all the pleasure you can get as much as you can get. Then there was the branch of hedonism that was like moderate your pleasure so that it's more pleasurable in the end. And so in order to do a good act, you have to have the right intention. It has to be a good thing, but you have to have the right intention going into it. And that's for the natural virtues and for the supernatural virtues. Obviously, the supernatural virtues have God as their end. But if these guys that are participating in this, they're going to build accidentally something. I think, there's going to be someone like Dr. William Mahoney or like someone who's going to like, critique me on my language here. I might not be speaking perfectly here in terms of moral theology, but they're accidentally building some virtues of discipline. They're accidentally building some virtues of like custody of the eyes and this sort of thing. But I think the culture sees the end being like, look, dude, you gotta go easy, man. You can't just lay off the porn for a little bit,
Yeah.
And even if it's like all the negative effects of watching pornography on your brain or whatever it is, but so it's not perfect, but it is like a semblance of like a little good, a little good that you can use to, I think, explain the bigger picture with people.
Yeah, because it is such an addiction. I mean, really, pornography viewing is such a drug. So is the habit of getting into masturbation. Just constant the lust is a drug. It's a vice. And I was talking with Dr. Mahoney not too long ago, and I was reading about how what happens with opioid withdrawals and why they're so unbearable. Essentially, long story short, when you are using opioids and you're just a super bad drug addict, the pain receptors in your brain are occupied and set, and essentially your body's saying, "I'm not going to relay pain signals." That plays a part in the euphoric experience of being high on opioids. Well, when Narcan is administered, or they try and quit and go to rehab, and the withdrawals kick in, because those pain receptors haven't been trained to endure pain, they haven't maintained their conditioning. Even putting on a shirt can be uncomfortable because you haven't been conditioning your body. And I think it's the same thing for this idea of like, oh, sure, yeah, it's good to jerk off for 11 months, but then this 1 month, nobody does it. that's ridiculous, because as long as you're entertaining or satisfying the appetite 11 months out of the year, first off, it's pointless. And second off, nobody's ever going to be able to accomplish it because there's no determined end goal, even on like a physical plane. The drug abuse, drug addiction, and withdrawals from those drugs on a physical plane are a perfect mirroring of what it is to live, a perfect mirroring of the more abstract, of the supernatural life. And how if you're going to constantly be satisfying those urges, those vices, it's going to hurt even more by even the slightest discomfort, you know?
Yeah. Even cutting back just a little bit, it's going to be painful. Well, and they've done studies too with guys who've their brains on porn, and it's just as addictive as something like I think it was cocaine that they compared it to, and it releases a similar amount of pleasure and dopamine and all the feel good chemicals in the brain. And I think the thing with these guys is that if you're just doing it for 1 month, but I mean, Thomas Aquinas talks about this quite a bit, where it's like, what is a vice? It's a bad habit. So you're doing this habit constantly, and just taking a 1 month break you're not really breaking the habit. You're just like stepping aside for a little bit so you can re-engage in that habit. It's again, I think it's a small bit of good, just like Sober October. It's like Joe Rogan's like total pothead. He does Sober October, gives his brain a little break, but then he jumps right back into it. I don't know.
Well, you know, and also, you know, to the porn thing, I think this is something that needs to be identified as to why it's so bad. Of course, yeah, it's very addictive. It changes brain structure. And when it comes to, you know, dopamine being released, with any satisfying or pleasurable experience, when dopamine is released, the next time you experience something that would trigger that release of dopamine, it needs to be more intense in order to satisfy the amount of dopamine your brain wants to secrete and then reabsorb. And, you know, we're going to hang out and enjoy this moment. And go ahead, dude.
No, I think it's so cool how like what the scholastics and like Thomas Aquinas, Aristotle, all these guys had figured, like if you do an action, it's a virtue, it's going to be easier to do it the next time. If you do a vice, it's going to be easier to do that vice again. It's so cool how to like neuroscience and psychology, all this stuff is catching up with what we've known for millennia
just
in the
from
church.
A philosophical
from
thought,
a philosophical
systematically thinking about it. It's interesting. You can, if you practice one level of virtue one day and you do that for 2 months, you're able to do a higher level of virtue or expression of that virtuous action for 2 months after that, and you can build and build. Well, the same thing. If you commit a vice, you're going to experience a level of pleasure, but then for that level of pleasure to happen, you have to commit an even more grievous vice, a more grievous action. And, you know, that's the thing with pornography. You go with something that's at first, you know, very, you know, heterosexual, consensual, but then it gets more violent, it gets more aggressive, it becomes polygamous. And and there's so much to this, because like the average young guy is like, well, what's the problem with a threesome, for example? And there's no theological or philosophical ability to comprehend the moral impact that has.
Yeah, even I know like Jeffrey Dahmer and some of these like major serial killers, they placed the blame, whether solely or whatever, but part of the blame for Ted Bundy, part of the blame for why they did what they did was they're like, well, porn just completely just messed up my brain. It turned into just heterosexual pornography. And then it was like you're saying, like it needs to be more extreme to get more pleasure, more extreme. And all of a sudden you're into like violent pornography. And it's just like, at that point, I mean, they're off the rails. Yeah,
you're off the rails. And how do you get back from that? And honestly, in the case of Jeffrey Dahmer, I know there was some stuff saying that, you know, he ended up giving his soul, giving his life to Christ. I think that there's speculation to be had there because of stuff, but it's really it takes a miracle to bring these guys back. But let's take it back to this idea of No Nut November and making almost like a type of joke of practicing virtue. And I think that's another aspect of it. This idea that you can make I don't want to say direct mockery, but I mean, it is. Oh, hey man, let's see how long we can go for without, you know, and that's a serious thing that you should always be embracing, or else you're going to be a slave. You're going to be a slave of custody of the eyes. You're going to be a slave to that lust. You're going to be a slave to those tendencies, whether you're out and you're out to eat, you're out in public. You'll never be able to have a fulfilling relationship with your girlfriend whatsoever. You guys are going to turn each other into objects for those, you know, for the non-incel listening.
Yeah.
But there's no fulfillment there. It's just an endless chase of pleasure because, of course, those are all material things.
Yeah,
love is infinite.
If
He gives that
anybody,
happiness.
if anybody wants to, you know, I've been married for a year now, but like if anybody wants to, if any guy is serious about entering into the married life, like you have got to get that under control, man. At least for, you know, a couple few years, because it's not, you know, what you're doing when you do that is you're objectifying the woman. You're just seeing her as an object of pleasure. But obviously, there's been many podcasts that have talked about this, but the object of your spouse is, you know, you're supposed to love her, and it's not just like pleasure all the time. So you got to get that. If any guys are watching, like, you have to get serious about that. Right now. But yeah, I mean, again, it's that little bit of good in this whole No Nut November thing is like the camaraderie. Like you see Exodus 90, Covenant Eyes, a lot of this like accountability, and they've brought it into this whole idea of No Nut November. You get around with the guys and it's like, hey guys, you know, no porn for a month. So again, it's a little bit of good, but it's really it's a bit of the ape of what really the full Christian moral life should look like.
No, that's well said. It is a little bit of an ape. And yeah, and last thing I'll really talk about it is, of course, you never know what type of exploitation is occurring in front of the camera, not just on the screen, but, you know, we don't know whether that was, you know, consensual, what was it, a rape, sex trafficking, etc. You'll never be able to know that with Pornhub or any other sites. I mean, even MasterCard, I believe, about a year ago, pulled transactions with Pornhub,
on
right?
Pornhub, yeah. And you're seeing it. A lot of these like famous pornographers are coming out and they're like, yeah, I didn't agree to any of this stuff. This is not what I expected to be. I thought it was just going to be consensual. It's brutal, man. It's just like, it's hard to listen to. Yeah.
And I that's really, it's animalistic. It's beastly. It's very beastly. It takes something that's very sacred, always has been considered to be sacred, and always has been attacked and abused and you know, chased after to be made something that it shouldn't be. But you know, the sexual act is something that has just absolutely zero value today. Zero value for 99% of the world.
Other than a passing pleasure, yeah. Other than a passing feel good. Oh, I feel good for, you know, whatever, a little bit of time, and then I'm done. And it's like, okay, you know, there's no semblance of and again, we can blame contraception. We can blame the Protestants, the Lambeth Conference, going way, way back. All these idiots that were trying to subvert our culture. They knew exactly what they were doing. They knew it would be an attack on the sexual act, would be an attack on the family, on all this stuff. And I mean, you saw the midterms. I mean, the Democrats came out and drove because they wanted to vote yes on all the pro-abortion stuff. Yeah. They wanted all those Democrats in there because they want their genitals to feel good.
Yeah, it was 1834. They paved the way for absolute hedonism, the first form that you were talking about in the beginning of the show. Well, Max, thanks for coming on. Before we go, for having me, man. Call to action. What's our call to action?
Stay off of the porn, man. I mean all these guys out there, stay off the pornography. It's really simple. And if you need help, again, take a little bit. No Nut November. The things that they get right. I mean, they have typically it's done in a group. Typically it's done for you know, a little bit of discipline. But take those little semblances of good things and do it for the right reasons. Do it for Christ. Do it because you want to be a spouse, someone who can sacrifice and love his wife and love a family into reality, into this modern era, as bad as it is. So get off the porn, guys. Well said, Max. We'll catch you guys next time on Red Top Report. Run into the box, check it.